Hi everyone, I'm Werner. I work at KDAB, KDAB. I flew from South Africa, so if I have a weird accent, that's why. We have a booth downstairs, Industrial Flutter, so that's why I'm dressed like a penguin. And without further ado, let's jump into why I'm here talking about calendars and yaks. So why calendars? First, let me show you what our time tracking tool at KDAB looks like, or one of them. It's called Charm and uses the Qt framework. This is just a screenshot showing what it looks like. It's very simple, it's straightforward, and it works well. So when I started working at KDAB, there was an internal project to rewrite this in Flutter called Trinket. So I got involved with the project, and I wanted to add a way to visualize events. So when I think about visualizing events, I think about a calendar. So just some examples. This is what I think of when I hear the word calendar. So it's like a month view. It's perfect for getting a high-level overview of what's happening during a given month. But for time tracking purposes, this is quite limited. It doesn't give you all the detail that you necessarily want to see, which leads me to the next type of view, which is like a week view. It basically shows more detail than a month view. So it shows what's happening, when it's happening, and for how long. Now, there are many variations of this, such as a day view as well, which just focuses on a single day. Then there's a schedule view, which is another option to visualize events. It simply lists them in chronological order. So I wanted something like this for Trinket, something that could display events with detail. I also wanted it to be interactive, so that if you needed to change something in your schedule or you track time incorrectly, you could make the adjustment quite easily. So with these requirements in mind, I went to pub.dev and I started looking for something that could do this. The first package that I found was the Sync Fusion Flutter Calendar. Now, this basically had all the features that I needed, but unfortunately, it's a commercial package, so it's not free. Then another one I looked at was the Flutter, calendar view. And this looked very promising, but it didn't have a way to interact with the calendar. And initially, I thought I would just implement interactivity into this package. However, when I actually started working on that and looking at the code, I realized it wouldn't be very feasible. So I decided to basically create a new calendar package that would solve my use case and possibly other people's use cases as well. So I chose the name Kalender. That's the Afrikaans word for calendar. I think there are other languages that also use this word. But yes, so the goal with Kalender is to create like a high-quality open source calendar package that's free or open source. I wanted it to be highly customizable without burdening myself too much. So I wanted it to be relatively easy to maintain. Now, the package in its current state is not perfect. There's lots of improvements that can be made. But before I get ahead of myself, let me show you what the package can do. So yeah, out of the box, we have the month view, which is just like a paginated view that can display events. Then there's the week view, of course, also paginated and vertically scrollable. Then for a more focused perspective, there's also the day view. And then finally, as well, the schedule view. So this all comes out of the box with the package. So it's relatively easy to implement something like that. Okay, but another thing is internationalization. So it uses directionality and material localizations under the hood. So for the times on the timeline on the left or the right in this case, that uses the material localizations. And then for the day names at the top, it uses the INTL package. So it just makes it easier. Yeah, cool. Another thing is obviously the interaction. That's what I needed for my application. So it's easy to create events, to reschedule them, and to change the duration. You can also, if you have the use case for it, you can drag events between calendar widgets, which is quite cool. Not that I use it, but it is there. So I'm just going to give you a quick example of what it looks like in code. So you just add the package with Flutter pub add calendar, or you can add it to your pubspec.yaml directly. So yeah, I just created a widget here called calendar example, stateful, and then in the state, I basically just define a couple of things. I'm quickly going to run through those things, and then I'm going to speak a bit more in depth about each of them. So the first thing I create is a calendar controller. So that's just a way to control or manage the calendar, a single calendar widget. Then there's the events controller. This manages the events that you want to display in the calendar view widget. And this can be shared between multiple widgets. Then there are the view configurations. I think there's a multi-day there, a month, and a schedule view configuration. They each have constructors for different variations of the view. Then there's the callbacks. So this is just a class that contains a bunch of callbacks to handle how you want to handle interactions with the widget. Then there's a components class. This is just used to customize certain components of the calendar widget. Then in the init state, I'm just adding a calendar event to the calendar, which is being displayed there. And then you can obviously dispose of the controllers if you want. Yeah, then there's the calendar view widget itself. So this is where all these controllers and configuration classes gets passed in. Then there's two other parts to it. There's the calendar header and the calendar body. And then each of these components basically take further configuration, the basically tile components. That's the way that these tiles are actually rendered. So it gives you the ability to customize with a builder what that tile looks like, but I'll get to that in a moment. So yeah, let's just go back to the calendar controller and look at what it can do. So it basically just provides a couple of methods to programmatically control the widget. So you can basically animate to specific date times or events or whatever you want. It also exposes some useful values in some value notifiers, like, for example, there I have the visible DateTime range being exposed, and that changes whenever a page changes. Cool, then there's the events controller. So this is responsible for, again, managing the events that are being displayed in the widget. So there's some useful methods for adding events, updating them, and removing them. So now you might be asking, what's a calendar event? Well, here's a simplified version of what it looks like in the package. It's basically just a class that contains a DateTime range and some data. So you'll notice the only thing that is required is the DateTime range, because that's the only data that the calendar package needs to actually render an event at a specific place. And so also notice that the data field is a generic type T. So that means you can pass in anything you want into that field. So this just makes it easy for you to, like, say, for example, you have a event model class in your app already. You can just extract the date time from that, pass it into the calendar event, and then the event you can pass into the data field. So yeah, this basically just makes it easy on me So I don't have to define a one-size-fits-all event model that can contain a number of things like a color or whatever. I'll just have an example here of what you can pass into that data field. So I think I have a title there, a description, and a color. Now you can basically define anything else in there that you want. And then at the bottom here, I just have an example of how you could add that to the events controller. Cool. So for customizing what those event tiles actually look like, I have another example here with 4 of the builders being defined. So the first one is the tile builder. So in this case, I'm just rendering it as a colored box, I think, and it's green, so you can see it's over there. As soon as I start dragging it, the tile when dragging builder is called, and that replaces the green tile. So if I drag it, you'll see there's a red tile now that says tile when dragging. Then there's a feedback tile and a drop target tile. The feedback tile is basically the blue tile that's following the cursor, and the drop target tile is the exact location where the event will be dropped if I release it. Okay, so yeah, this basically gives you a bunch of freedom to decide how you want to display these tiles or what they should look like. But just remember that not to make them too expensive, because you will probably run into some performance issues if you do it like animations on each tile. So yeah. Now I'm just going to look at the callbacks. So this again just handles the user interaction. So here's a few of them. I'm just going to create an event here. You'll see the on event created is called, and then I just add it to the events controller from there. Then I can click on an event, which calls the on event tab, I think. Yes. So this is useful if you, for example, want to show a pop-up to have the user modify the event. Then there's the on event change callback, which gets called if I was to reschedule it or change the duration. It also gets called. Then there's on tapped and on long pressed. On tapped and on long pressed. These get called whenever the user clicks on the calendar or long presses on it. Ooh, I actually created an event there, sorry. So, yeah. Then there's also an easy way to change how the interaction works or behaves, how the calendar behaves, more on a global scale almost. So if you want to say, for example, the calendar body, you do not want the user to be able to reschedule or change the duration of an event, you can do that. So over here, you can still create events, but you can't reschedule them or resize them. But in the header, those are not being set, so I can still create events and reschedule them. Cool, then there's the calendar components. So this is basically changing the style of the default components that come with the package. So in this case, I think there's I changed the color for a bunch of different things. Now this is not, these are just styling a way to style these components. But you're not limited to just this. You can provide custom builders for each of the components if you want to. So I actually have an example here of Trinket running. As you can see, it looks similar, but it's different. We basically have a dark color scheme with some different kind of hour lines. There's also the header with some progress bars. And I think I also implemented pinch to zoom or control plus scroll wheel. So this is just an example of what it can look like with custom builders. Yeah, I just showed you. Good. Okay, so far I've basically shown you what the calendar package can do and roughly how to use it and the different parts of it. Now I want to share a bit about the journey of getting it to this point. So when I initially started working on the package, I was very new to Flutter. I think maybe like 6 months or a year. So creating the package was a learning experience, and it still is. So I'm just going to start off this part of the talk by sharing a couple of the mistakes I made, how I fixed them, just some interesting things. And then I'm going to speak a bit about how the event tiles are being laid out. And finally, I'll get to what the package has to do with Yaks. Cool. So the first mistake or complication I ran into was with DateTime calculations. And as you can imagine, a package like this has to do a lot of calculations with date times to figure out where to put everything, what to display where. So initially, these calculations were spread out throughout the code base. Because I was new to Flutter, I didn't really know a lot. So that got a bit tricky to manage. So just as an example, I searched for everywhere I used the add method of the DateTime class. It's pretty much everywhere, bunch of different files. Now this was all well and good until the first issue appeared. So in this issue, the calendar is basically just rendering an extra day in the body, which it should not do. So it took me a bit of time to figure out where that happened, and it just got annoying. So I decided to start using extension methods. For those of you who don't know, extension methods are just a way to add functionality to an existing class without modifying that class. So it's very useful for adding utility methods. So one of these methods I added was the days extension method on the DateTime range. This is just an example. It does look quite different now in the package, but just bear with me. So this extension method returns a list of date times that a DateTime range spans. So firstly, I calculate the number of days by taking the difference between the start and the end date. And then I run through a for loop where I just add I number of days to the start date, which is then added to a list, which is then returned. Now, some of you might see a possible issue with this implementation. So I was just going to explain the mistake I made and how I fixed it. So basically, let's say I construct date time for the 26th of October 2025, and I add a duration of 1 day to it. Now, depending on where you are in the world, you will get a different result. In South Africa, we get the 27th, but in Germany, you get the 26th at 11 o'clock. So this is because of daylight savings time. I'm sure most of you are familiar with this, but the short of it is that on the 26th of October, the day in Germany has 25 hours instead of 24. So what are the options that we have to not be affected by daylight savings? First one is we can use a copy with and just add a calendar day to the date field. And the other option is to use UTC date times. So yeah, just construct a UTC date time class, add a duration of 1 day to it, and then from that result, I construct a local date time again. So yeah, those are basically the options we have, or that I had. So just to show you what the fix looked like, I just construct 2 UTC date times, and then I take the difference of those. And then I run through the for loop again and use the copy with to add a day. So after doing this for a bunch of methods spread out through the app and creating extension methods. As you can imagine, that was quite frustrating throughout the package. Yeah. It was a frustrating experience. So I needed a way to prevent that from happening again. So I basically wrote a bunch of tests to make sure that I do not implement something again that could, or that's not daylight savings safe. And so I think initially when I started the package, my mindset was not where it is now. So I was more like, fix a bug and move on. Don't write tests, which is bad. I realize that now. So I think another thing that changed my mind about tests was that I'm ultimately responsible for this package. And it's up to me to make sure that it moves in the right direction. So the goal, again, is a high-quality calendar package. And tests is one of those things. So an interesting way that I do these tests is with GitHub Actions. Not that interesting, but I basically have a GitHub Actions with a matrix in it that just runs all the unit tests and widget tests in different time zones, just to make sure that if I do add something or change something, I will know immediately if it broke something in the package. Okay, just take a moment. Okay. So another interesting thing that came up was a performance issue. This came up during when I deployed it in Trinket. Basically, one of my colleagues reached out to me and he mentioned that he was experiencing some performance issues when he was navigating around the package, the calendar widget. So after I chatted with him for a bit, I found out that he had imported like 10 years or 20 years worth of time tracking data from Charm. So I was not sure how the package would handle large data sets, and clearly he was experiencing performance issues. So I created a test case and I spun up the performance profiler. So yeah, I have a friend there highlighted where the test app was a bit janky. So I'm just going to zoom in on that. And as you can see, there's a large empty space at the bottom, where the UI thread isn't really doing anything. And in fact, it isn't doing much, but the CPU is actually the culprit here. So I had a look at the CPU profile, CPU flame chart, and I'll just zoom in on that as well. So you can see that there's a lot of time being spent, CPU time being spent on calling this method from the events controller. It's the get events for DateTime range. So that's basically a function that retrieves the events from the events controller for a specific DateTime range. Now, why is it taking so long to execute? Well, it came down to the fact that the events were stored in a list, and that is not ideal, especially when you need to iterate through that entire list every time you are looking for a specific events during a range. So what was the fix for this? It's relatively straightforward. Just use a map. Well, I decided to use a map. So it's much faster if you have a key. That lookup is much faster. So basically decided to go with two maps. One on the left uses an ID as a unique key and the event as a value. And the second one on the right uses a date as a unique key and a list of event IDs as values. So, for example, say I'm looking for events on the 2nd of October. I would retrieve the list of IDs from the map containing dates and IDs. And then I would just go to the first map or the second map in this case, just to find the events that need to be displayed. So this is much faster, and just to show the difference it made, there's a screenshot of the method table before and after the change. I think the most important thing there to take note of is the percentage of total time. So yes, basically just a big improvement. Cool. Now I get to how events are laid out. It was quite a fun thing to do to figure out. So there are basically two main types of layouting happening. The first one is for the week view or day view, which is events being laid out vertically on a timeline. The second big way is to lay out events horizontally on a timeline for the month view or the week view header. I'm just going to dig a bit deeper into how events are laid out in the week view or the vertically on a timeline. So basically use the custom multi-child layout widget for this. So I just want to read a small part of the documentation here. It's appropriate when there are complex relationships between the size and positioning of multiple widgets. So just to show you what this actually looks like in code. Now I'm not going to explain all of this. I'm just going to give you a high-level overview. So here we have a widget that takes a list of calendar events. Then it returns a custom multi-child layout widget. You'll see it takes a layout delegate, which basically defines the layout logic to use. And then it also takes a list of children, each of which is wrapped in a layout ID. That's basically just so the delegate can figure out or know which widget is which event. And then there's the delegate itself. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail here. It gets a bit complicated. But in the delegate, there's a perform layout method, which is called. And that the perform layout is called when the layout needs to be calculated. So this is where there's an algorithm that's implemented. And it basically just decides where events should be placed. Now, I'm not going to go through that algorithm. It will probably take me 30 minutes or an hour. So let's not do that. Let me just show you what it looks like. So here's a side-by-side layout algorithm. So if I was to move this event, it would lay out these events next to each other. Like this. I can even add another event to create something like this. Now, there's another one that comes with the package, and that's the overlap layout delegate, which will lay out events on top of one another. And yeah, you can also, if you have time, you can basically create your own delegate, so you can customize this even further. Not that I recommend it. It does take quite a bit of time. So yeah. Cool. Now we finally get to what yaks have to do with this package. So just to give you the definition that I found of yak shaving, basically is any seemingly pointless activity which is actually necessary to solve a problem, which solves a problem, which several levels of recursion later solves the real problem you're working on. Now I also just want to read you a piece of the Flutter repo styling guide, where they also have a reference to yak shaving. They say yak shaving, or in reference to yak shaving, this is an encouragement to take on the larger effort necessary to perform a fix for a problem rather than just applying a band-aid. So I'm just going to go through like a small story of something I needed to change in the package and how that evolved over time. So it basically started with how interaction used to work. So this is how it used to work. It was using gesture detectors to figure out where the event should go or move. And after a colleague pointed out that Flutter has the draggable and drag target widgets, I decided, yeah, I should probably switch to that. And so for those of you who have not encountered these widgets before, this is basically what they do. They allow you to drag widgets around and drop them on targets that can accept them. There is a link to the documentation if you want to check that out later. But yeah. Okay, so I wanted to switch to the drag target, drop draggables and drag target widgets. Now, this wasn't a huge technical hurdle, so most of the calculations would remain similar between using a gesture detector and using the draggable widget. This is what I wanted it to look like, or what it looked like after the change. But I just want to point out that the draggable has 3 states, which is a child when dragging, and feedback widgets. And I added a 4th state, which is the drop target tile. So after adding the draggable widget, I needed to make some changes to the API to accommodate the new states. So just as an example, this is what it could look like, or would have looked like. And I was not very happy with that. It felt a bit overwhelming. So I think there's ways to build for day views, and then for multi-day views, and then for schedule. So this was not very great. It's a bit too much. So basically ended up creating a tile components class here on the right, which contains the state for the different widgets, or the different states, builders for the different states that the event tile could be in. And then, yeah, basically. So having come this far already, making changes to the packages API, I decided I wanted another change, and that's the way basically to allow for more customization in the header and the body widgets, without adding too many new properties to the constructor. So basically changed it so the user needs to, or the developer needs to, provide the calendar header and calendar body directly to the calendar view widget. This basically allows you to do stuff like wrap the header in a material widget, or whatever kind of decoration you want. So yeah, this also actually enabled the pinch to zoom or scroll control scroll wheel. So you could also wrap the body in something like a listener or a gesture detector to do some funky stuff like this. Yeah. Cool. So the story does not actually end here. I could probably continue for a bit more, but I just want to point out that like this yak, the calendar is not quite shaved. It's not perfect, and there's probably still a lot of bugs. But I need some help from the community to basically make this truly a high-quality package. And if you are interested in helping out, whether by reporting a bug, requesting a feature, or even helping to finish shaving this yak by opening a pull request, you can find me at the Industrial Flutter booth downstairs. You can just check out the project on GitHub, and you can find it on pub.dev for Kalender. So yeah, I see I spoke a bit faster than I should have, but yeah. Thanks for listening to me ramble about this package and the journey of building it. If there are any questions. Yes.